Hi guys, it's Blackie. Okay, today, even though it's Friday, it's not going to be a down and dirty woodscraft. It's going to be kind of like a quick Q&A. It's because I've had a bunch of questions come in from a lot of different directions right now, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to answer them right quick. So, we will have another down and dirty woodscraft next week. We're getting everything back rolling where I'm posting one a day, but you know, life gets in the way and it's a holiday. Thanksgiving was yesterday. And so that kind of, I got family commitments just like you do. So this is early in the morning. I'm out here trying to get this done right quick and get it posted. First off, I had a subscriber ask me about wooden bowls, noggins, kuskas, things like that. How do you need to treat them when you're not in the field? Okay, this is actually a really good question. Wooden bowls, spoons, things like that can be harbingers of bacteria because they get scratches and they have grain in them. And so if they've been in food and they've been rinsed off, even though they've been rinsed off, down in the grain of the wood, you can still have some bacteria that will slowly grow. Now this wasn't such a big deal for Grandma and Grandma's kitchen because she'd rinse them and she'd put them right back up and think that spoon's going to be used next couple hours or the next day. There wasn't a long time between washings, cleanings, being put into boiling hot water, and etc. So bacteria really didn't get that big an opportunity because we're talking about long, slow growth. But what happens if I've got a Kutska and I take it and I utilize it and I've cut meat up in the bottom of it and I've got scratches in it and I get home and it's 2 months before I go camping again? How should I treat that? Well, what I recommend you do is give it a good washing and do kind of like the military do. If I'm going to put it up, okay, I'm going to take it and I'm going to put me some water in here and just put like a drop or two of something to sterilize it. Now you can use unscented, uncolored, plain bleach. But I tell you what I like to do, salt water. Very few things can live in salt. So put me a big dash of salt in there, make a slurry like a salt paste and rub it around, getting all them nooks and crannies, and let that sit for 5-10 minutes. And then rinse it off, let it dry, and put it up. If it's been in the put up for quite a while, like a month or so, I hadn't had an opportunity to go, I'm going to pull it out, I'm going to repeat that process. I'm going to put me a little table salt in there with some water, do me a good slurry, let it sit about 10 minutes, rinse it off because salt water kills bacteria. Salt concentrations, okay? Same thing with spoons. And one of my grandmother's favorite things to do is she would have a container that the spoons went into, and she'd go and put a big dash of salt, add some hot tap water, and just stand all the spoons up in it and let them sit there for like 15-20 minutes, and then rinse them off and, you know, use them for something. That was how she, quote, quote, cleaned them. It's actually just she's kind of sterilizing them. So salt can be used to sterilize these in this kind of environment we're talking about. Okay, so that's what I do on mine. My old Kukska that I've had for God knows how long. I got it at a rendezvous, bought it. I didn't make it. And this was one of my favorite carrying and eating bowls for a long, long time. You're going to see this in videos. So I just want to mention that out. And wooden spoons, that's what I do is I use salt, sterilize them. Okay, next, in my the Redneck Camper series, I had someone point out that said, recently, Blackie, didn't I see a Ford Explorer? Weren't you going to be using an Explorer for something? Actually, it's an old 1992 Nissan Pathfinder I recently picked up. It's in really, really good shape. And it's going to be my other vehicle is going to be my Nissan Pathfinder. Now, along the lines of the camper series, I've had several people saying, Blackie, could I use a van? Absolutely. Could I use something like this? Yes, within reason. You're not going to have the leg room in this, but if you're a slightly smaller stature person, you can sleep diagonally with the seats laid down in the back of one of these with an air mattress or a pad or something like that. So yes, even a vehicle like this can be made to serve as a redneck camper. Okay, don't like I said, think outside the box. Don't get locked into this mindset of it has to be this. Take these rules I'm talking about, this clear vision like I recently said, and apply it to the vehicle you want to use. If you want to use an old panel van, absolutely, that can work really, really well. How about an old Pathfinder or a Suburban or even a station wagon if you got one of those old things? Yes, they can be made to work. For several years there was a guy that I was friends with, Mr. Edward. He'd picked up a hearse, and he'd converted the hearse to a camper. And he had taken this Cadillac hearse and jacked it up to give it 4 more inches of ground clearance, and his big old engine Cadillac, and he was fishing on creek banks, river banks, a lot of the lakes, and he was a big fisherman, see. And so it's just a big Cadillac station wagon. It's just slightly configuration to be a hearse, but think of it like a big Cadillac. And he had picked it up for a song, and it had like 40,000 miles on it. It was a 15-year-old hearse. Hearses don't go very far. And so it wasn't even broke in. And so he got it for a song. He turned it into a camper. And I'd see him fishing. There's enough room on that roof to put a John boat. So, you know, he had a canoe. He had a tow-behind trailer on it, and he had a really good camper out of that. It was a little odd to look at, but you know, don't get locked down and strictly into one thing. Take your time and come up with what you want to do. Okay, next. I had someone ask the question, am I going to be going to work with any schools anytime soon? Well, myself and the Fuel the Fire instructors have got something on the horizon. We have not finalized it yet, but once we do, I will post a video on that, and it'll be sometime next year. We're talking about holding some classes, and I'll be one of the instructors at the classes. So as soon as I get anything concrete, I will do a video. But thank you for asking, but yes, there will be that. Okay, next. Yesterday I did a video talking about blankets. Now let me clarify straight up here, guys. That's a $195 blanket. That's a lot of money. Okay. And I need to apologize because my numbers were in error. Okay. Let me explain. Sorry, I'm back behind the range again, and you know how it is. I'm not dodging bullets. We're okay. When I was rendezvousing back in the day, and all you were allowed to use was a blanket, and you could get the surplus blankets that were thin and cheap and were miserable to use in real cold weather. Most of the surplus military blankets are designed to use in a barracks on a bed. Even the World War II blankets, you know, were meant to be used on a barracks on a bed, and guys just wore multiple layers. If you go back and look at the pictures of World War II, you know, the Battle of Bastogne and everything, these guys are walking around, they're wearing multiple layers in this great big old huge greatcoat, which is a heavy wool blanket is what it is. And then they got blanket scraps wrapped around their legs, and they're looking like Pillsbury Doughboys. They got so many layers on, so they could take a standard old blanket and just wrap it around them. That was to keep snow off of them because they had enough layers, see. But whenever you're trying to camp with just a blanket, and it's going to be cold, you want a big fluffy blanket to trap the heat. And we're going to get into that in the coming series. And the reason for me bringing out and making this deal and bringing this blanket out, because I wanted a blanket, and like I had said earlier, my Whitneys were so dang expensive. When I bought my big Earl of Whitney horse blanket in like 1997, that was a $350 blanket. That's well over $500 or $600 today, and it was a well worth the investment. I mean, I camped in rain, I kept in just horrible conditions and stayed warm. 2 of those blankets, and that one and the other Whitney I had, and I could go down to 15, 16 degrees with just those 2 blankets because my layering system that I could utilize. And so, yeah, it was worth that investment to me because I was working in a living history. You couldn't bring a sleeping bag. You had to use a wool blanket. And so I went with that. And all I know, for the past 2 years, actually longer than that, in several videos I talked about when I had started out, I was with a poncho and a blanket. And we were camping out every month of the year. And the tips and tricks. And I had a lot of people ask me to show them that. And so I didn't want to use my old Whitneys. And the last time I had looked at the price of a Whitney was 10, 15 years ago, guys, and it was like $500 because it was a family member was getting married and they wanted a big blanket for a wedding present. I said, get them a Whitney. And so we went and looked at a Buffalo Road weight Whitney, and it was like $485. And so that's where I got the mind thing that they're $500 blankets. Apparently now when I look on eBay, it shows them a lot cheaper than that. So I was incorrect, and I'm sorry. But I had the mindset of that's how much that blanket was because I had seen them at that price. But again, I'm sorry. I was 10 years out of date. But I'm going to be doing the Ground Pounder series starting probably in December. And because I told you I would do it in the winter. And what the Ground Pounder series is going to be about is I'm going to have a blanket. I'm going to have a poncho. I'm going to have a canteen and canteen cook set. I'm going to have my old single shot gun and a couple of things. And we're going to go overnight campouts no matter what the weather is. Now, of course, I'm going to try to avoid a driving downpour just because I don't want my camera to die. And you'd avoid going out there and you'd pull out of the woods if you had the choice because it's nothing but miserable with that. But I'm going to show you how to stay warm and how to layer up and how to do stuff. And that's where this blanket's going to come in. And since I knew I was going to get 20 million questions about that blanket, I went ahead and posted that video yesterday, giving you an idea about the blanket. If you're looking for something like that, I encourage you to invest in it. But you don't have to. Okay? Don't think I'm saying, you have to have this. No. I'm just putting it out there. This is what Blackie's going to be using. And here's where Blackie got it. Okay? And the fact that Bombproof was kind enough to offer to logo it to me is great. But there's only going to be 20 of them. So, it's just, I want you to know where I got the blanket and where I'm coming from and what we're going to be doing. Because I'm not going out in January with a U.S. Army blanket. I'm not going out in January with an Italian 100% wool blanket. I'll freeze to death. Been there, done that. They're good blankets, but they're not that good a blanket. They're not thick enough to hold that warmth. And that's the whole thing about the blankets. You need layers for that heat to come up and get trapped in. And that's the reason you need a bigger, thicker blanket. And that's the reason that big queen, you'll see it in the video. Enough of that. But, back to, okay, next. The next thing. Okay. Now, pocket knives. I had someone ask me about this. They said that when they're cutting with a pocket knife, how do you cut with a pocket knife and not have it close up on your hand? Okay? That's a fair question for people that have not done a lot of work with a pocket knife. Okay, let us discuss it. First, a slip joint pocket knife uses just spring tension to hold the blade straight. And that's what they call a walk, sail, stay, it pops. Okay? Now, if you look right here, there's a little shelf. That little point right there on the shelf is what actually comes to rest on the inside and holds the blade up so that when you close it like this, that blade edge doesn't bang into that steel spring on the bottom side. Okay? So whenever you're using a slip joint knife, the proper way that I like to do it is this. To open it, I put my thumb into the little nick in the blade and I hold that still and then I pull the handle away from it. Notice how my fingers are out of the way. Okay? So if you do this and you do that and you wrap your hand around it, if that blade went, your finger'd be in there, right? So the way I was taught to open a pocket knife was point up like that where the tip of the blade's up, pinch, grab, pull away, grip the blade, lock it open. Okay? Now, pull toward you when you're cutting or push away from you when you're cutting to create your fuzzy sticks or whatever. Push away from you. See how my finger, this is standard whittling technique This is the standard stuff that you would learn with a Mora or any other knife you can learn with a pocket knife. But you don't push backwards against the blade because it wants to close. Okay? So don't think stabbing implement. Don't do this. Because if you do, you run the risk of it and closing up on your fingers. Okay? So it is push away, or it is reverse, and notice I'm holding and using my thumb. Use my thumb to pull toward me. Now you see, it can't cut me. It looks like that, but you see what's actually happening? It can't get me. I can't come back and hit my thumb with it because I'm pulling it, or I anchor my thumb and I flick my hand. My hand only has limited range it can move, so less cutting. Any good book on whittling techniques is going to tell you this stuff. And so whittling with the knife, pushing away, or the draw cuts towards you. Also, just like with a big knife, tucking your elbows in if you're going to be doing this. So you can only come so far. Your hand don't want to come any closer. So it's a natural stop if I'm trying to dish out, curve, cook, cut in, whatever, to make a X type of cut. There are different types of cuts with a pocket knife, just like there is with a belt knife. But you can whittle and do most of the same jobs, making dingle sticks, making small useful items with a pocket knife. And a pretty good sized pocket knife like this does the job of something like a Mora or a small belt knife. And that's the reason many of our ancestors carried such knives, is this. Now notice that this is a two-bladed knife. And this is a Robinson Jackknife. And again, point it up, take your thumb, hook at, and pull the handle away. It's got a long, narrow blade, and that's, notice it's shorter. That's for much more detail work like this. And there's a big general purpose blade. Okay. Now with pocket knives, my mindset, and I ought to down the line do a series just on pocket knife uses. Okay, and I did a series on pocket knives a long time ago, but actually a couple, but I need to go back and look at it, and we need to just carve some useful items with a pocket knife. But the big blade is the big tool blade. Okay, the little blade is a precision blade. So if I'm going to sharpen one to a true razor, it's going to be that little blade, because that's going to be something really precise up close, usually something involving me. And so if I'm having to dig that splinter out or whatever, I want that little bitty blade that I can control it much better and do less damage to me and get that splinter out of me or whatever. The big blade, now notice how it's got that rounded back on this jack, that's for skinning. This would be a good game processing size right there. Now you remember I told you about that little nub back there? I put it in my hand so that when my thumb naturally comes to rest, just like that, it doesn't want to go forward, but it wants to, I want to put it against that nub and bear down onto this knuckle. Straight down, firm. That way my thumb don't want to slide forward. Now I don't shove, I gently push with the whole hand. The hand becomes tight. Don't ever try to shove, because your hand could slide up on that blade. See? So you put your thumb there, make a strong grip, and push hard straight down with your thumb, and that's how you gently push the blade, like in skinning and things like that. Never stab, because your hand can slide down the blade. Okay? This is true of any kind of knife without a guard on it. And if you look, there's even pocket knives with guards on them. And there's a reason for that. That was for people that did stabbing motions and stuff like that, that had to do certain things. Some people in cleaning big game would do like a stabbing, almost like a can opener, dot, 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 and then come back and cut the dots to take off a big shoulder or something like that. And I have seen it close up on their hand before. So it is not a good practice to utilize any kind of stabbing motion with any kind of slip joint knife. Okay? It is a knife that can be very, very useful in the bushcraft witchcraft camp, but it needs to be where you're using pull cuts, push cuts. That's the way to use it. Okay? Hope this gives you some ideas, and thank you very much for the comments and the questions. If you have some more questions, and this is the reason I want to bring this up, I'm going to do another 20 question video next week or so. So if you have any questions you would like me to answer, put them in the comments down below, and I will put them into that 20 questions video and answer your questions for you. Always feel free to reach out and say, hey, Blackie, I got a question. I'll be happy to help you any way I can. Till next time, guys, I'm Blackie, wishing you safe journeys. Have a great day, guys.